Kind greetings and welcome, welcome to our broadcast tonight, The Veteran Among Us, LGBTQIA Veteran Plus. Um, we are so incredibly blessed tonight by a guest who tops all guests we've had heretofore talking about the military. We will shortly bring him on. I want you to know that he is gifted to us by way of our beloved co-chaplain, Chaplain Maureen F. Burns. If you and we appreciate you, Chaplain Burns, for
Thank you.
bringing our guest to us tonight. Uh, he is renowned, to say the least, and we invite you to call your fellow veterans, especially your the transgender veterans that you know, because tonight our subject is transgender rights in the military and beyond. So we are going to invite you to call everybody because, we are about informing people and inspiring people and including people and welcoming everybody to the hospitality of God. So do that for yourself and do that for us, that others may know of this incredible veteran that is about to join us. His name is Zander Keig. Uh, Come on board, Zander Keig. He is amazing. Look at that smile. He is living on the West Coast, correct? On the
I'm in
East Coast.
Orlando now.
Down in uh, our favorite former president's area of the world. Of course, I'm being facetious, but I couldn't resist that. So, how did you participate, by the way, in that tragic event that happened in Orlando at the club several years ago? Or were you there at that time?
No, I wasn't in Orlando. That was 5 years ago at the Pulse nightclub. I was living in San Diego at the time. So I am new. I've been here 1 year now, and we just commemorated the fifth anniversary of the Pulse massacre. So it's been turned into a museum, and there were a lot of events that went on for about a month. So it's
Wonderful.
something that's very central to Orlando for sure.
Great.
Wonderful. Glad to hear that you're there and that you participated in the fifth anniversary. I tell you, it was tragic for me. It was so tragic for me that I called Bishop Flunder and asked her for prayer because I felt that I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I had an appointment that day with my dentist at Ann Arbor, VA, and by the time I got there, I was so shook that he sent me to the urgent care. I was crying. I felt that I was a part of that. Well, I was a part of that because I'm a part of the LGBTQIA community. But it was quite traumatic for me, and I don't think that this is the first time I've even mentioned it because it was traumatic, and because I know that you're a therapist, right? so, so I figured if anything started happening, you could snap me out of it, or you could hypnotize me, and then we could go on with the broadcast. But thank you for that.
Well,
Um,
one of the, uh, in a lot of tragedies, sometimes good comes of it,
yes,
right? The afterwards. And so as a result of the Pulse nightclub massacre, an organization was formed in Orlando called One Orlando, or the One Orlando Alliance, which is made up of community-based organizations, government agencies, city government departments, private entities that have all come together from LGBT community and outside of the community, but allies and supporters, family members, so that the work that's been done by that alliance has really helped the community move forward.
Awesome. That is absolutely wonderful. That is something else that we dream of, is big as we approach other platforms, social media platforms. Our intent is to reach the world with people like you, and bringing us up to date on what's happening in Orlando. It's the Pulse Center, and how all that is coming together. And so, let me say right up front that we would love to have you back again on our Thursday, Triumphant Thursday broadcast. We don't know when, but definitely after we're on reaching a larger audience. I did, as I shared with you, I did write an article uh, titled "Transgender Rights in the Military and Beyond." My article goes to about 300. I've got about 300 to 400 what do you call it, emails that it goes to, and then later I upload it on Facebook, and I uploaded it on Twitter, and I'm going to upload it on Instagram, inviting people to see this after the fact or during the fact. And our administrator, Pastor Sue, has also submitted it to platforms that with which she works. And I don't and if Chaplain Maureen hasn't yet, she will also do it after the fact. So we're
Also remember LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Yeah, I submitted it to LinkedIn tonight.
Okay, great.
I did do that because that's where Chaplain Maureen found you. Not
Yeah.
that you were lost. That's not the implication. And I will share this article with you. And Chaplain Mo is going to give us the scripture.
Okay, the scripture is Matthew 27:54. Surely, surely this is the Son of God.
Okay. Now, globally, of course, we're talking about Jesus Christ and the centurion that made that comment at the cross. Locally, we're talking about you. How about that? Okay. And this is how the article starts. It has your photo on it, as well as Chaplain Maureen and my photo. And it starts, Dear One, the Department of Veterans Affairs announced September 20th that veterans forced out of the military with other than honorable discharges under the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy will now be eligible for VA benefits. Despite serving with extraordinary honor and courage throughout our history, more than 100,000 American service members have been discharged based on their sexual orientation or gender identity, including some 14,000 under Don't Ask, Don't Tell. President Biden said in a statement released on the 10th anniversary of the repeal of the policy, I am thankful for all of the LGBTQ plus service members and veterans who strengthen our military and our nation, the president added. We must honor their service and their sacrifice by continuing to fight for full equality for LGBTQ plus people. Was it not a service member who proclaimed, Surely this must be the Son of God? Veterans have made enormous contributions to strengthening the faith and equal rights for their fellow LGBTQIA veterans plus. Zander Keig has received more than 10 press award recognitions, including NASW, National Association for Social Workers, of the Year award in 2020 and in 3 other years. W. Path, Henry Benjamin Distinguished Educator, the Benjamin F. Dillingham III and Bridget Wilson LGBT Veterans Wall of Honor in 2017, the top 20 successful transgender Americans you should know, and these 48 trans women and men changed the world. Keig is also the author of Grace Under Fire, Outstanding Social Worker, Do Men Have It Easier? Social Workers Speak, Transgender Men Talk About Life on the Other Side of the Divide, Triumphant of Determination, and Coming of Age, Gender Odyssey blog, among many, many, many others. Who is this person? Is the question. Join us tonight and meet our special guest, Zander Keig.
I like how you say it, like a superhero.
You are a superhero. Tell us a little bit about who you are. I didn't write who you are because I wanted that to be a part of the discussion. I listed some of the amazing things that you've done, that you've written, and for which you have been awarded and honored and recognized. But who are you?
Well, I should state that some of the things you listed were interviews of me. I didn't write them, but I was interviewed.
Okay.
So I provided the information. Somebody else wrote it.
Okay.
I appreciate the mentioning. So who am I? Who is Zander Keig? Well, I'm 55 years old. I'm from Los Angeles, California originally. I live in Orlando, Florida now. I'm first generation, born in this country. My family's from Mexico, so I was raised in a Mexican family in Los Angeles, attending Roman Catholic church services on Saturday in Spanish until I was, around 13 years old. I went to Catholic school for some of those years as well and did my catechism classes, CCD classes. And then, I got into a little bit of trouble, and I was what you would, call like a juvenile delinquent. And that kind of steered me in some other directions for a little while. I ended up in a group home for a little while, a psychiatric hospital for some time. I ran away from home a bunch, and I was sort of wandering around trying to find my way. I landed into a relationship with a woman. I'm a trans man, so I was a lesbian prior to my transition. I ended up in a relationship with a woman who was very abusive, and my only thought of escape was to either take my own life or join the military. And so I joined the military. Thankfully,
Amazing.
that was the option that I chose. So I served in the United States Coast Guard. I was medically discharged from the Coast Guard after injuring myself in the line of duty. And I've, since then, that was 1988. So I was out of the military a long time ago. And in the interim years, I've done a lot of different things. I was in law enforcement for some time. I worked in the natural foods industry. I went to college. Ultimately, when I was 30, I decided to go to college. I received vocational rehabilitation from the Department of Veterans Affairs. I went to college. And then when I was in college, I was encouraged by my faculty advisor to go to graduate school. I didn't even know what graduate school was. I'm the first college graduate in my family. So I was like, graduate school, what's that? So I looked it up and I thought, oh, sure, I can do that. So I went to graduate school. My bachelor's is in speech, and my first master's degree is in conflict resolution. And then while I was in graduate school, I liked it so much, I thought I should do a doctorate. And so I applied to the doctorate program. I got accepted, but then I thought, wait a minute. There were a few years back when I was very active in MCC San Diego that I thought I wanted to go to seminary. And so I put the PhD on hold and I went off to seminary in Berkeley, California. And that's where I met my wife. We've been together now 19 years.
Zander, was that PSR Or
It
another
was,
school?
yeah, Pacific School of Religion, the same as Bishop Flunder. And I've been to that church. I saw the chorus sing, or choir. And so I had this degree in conflict resolution. I had a degree in theology. It was a master's of theology, not a master's of divinity like my wife Margaret did. And so I found that I wasn't really finding the kind of work that I wanted to do long term. I worked with veterans for the state of California as employment specialist. I worked at Job Corps with at-risk youth as a career transition specialist. But ultimately, I decided to go to get my master's of social work, and that was a great choice for me. My first job right out of school was at the Department of Veterans Affairs. I worked for the Healthcare for Homeless Veterans program, and I did that for about 4.5 years. And then I moved over to the Navy, working for Navy Medicine West at Naval Hospital San Diego, or Balboa Hospital, as most people know it as. And I was one of the individuals that was instrumental in developing and then running the transgender care team for Navy Medicine West. So I had approximately 300 people over the course of about 3.5 years on my caseload that I helped them navigate through their command approved gender transition. And they were spread all over Pacific Islands and Hawaii, Asia, Western United States. So it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that job. I moved to Florida because my father has dementia now and he needed a caregiver. So I'm a family caregiver of a veteran. He served in the Marine Corps. Yeah, so I'm loving life out here in Florida. It's beautiful. I'm surrounded by my family, my wife's family. So that's been really nice. I do miss San Diego, of course, because it's a beautiful place, beautiful place to live. Yeah, I'm not really sure what else to say about there's when you get when you get to be older, how do you tell your story?
Right.
I could do 10 of these and you still wouldn't really have my whole story. But I figure I gave a little bit of information along the way that might be helpful for further discussion.
Well, thanks for that
Tremendous.
Polaroid.
Huh?
Thanks for that Polaroid. That snapshot.
You're very welcome.
Chaplain Mo, what is a Polaroid?
They used to
Oh,
have
okay.
cameras that the picture came right out of.
Yes, 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 yes. And
Snapshot.
I'm certainly that is there is more to know of you and about you. And thank you for, as Chaplain Mo said, that Polaroid. Chaplain Mo, do you have
You're frozen. Dr. PJ, you're frozen.
Yeah, she probably can't hear you if she's frozen. So let me, Chaplain Maureen, if you would please continue that conversation with Xander, and I am going to
Not,
call
not
uh,
a problem. So
Chaplain
first of
PJ
all,
and see if I
Xander,
can help her.
I definitely, as I did before we came on, want to thank you for your service. I know that oftentimes as veterans, we get that compliment and we just say, yeah, thanks, whatever. But it's not thanks, whatever. It is from one veteran to another. I really appreciate you, bro. I really
Absolutely. Well, and
appreciate your service.
I served pre Don't Ask, Don't Tell. So those were the scarier days too, right?
Oh, me too. Me
Yeah.
too. I actually got caught going into a bar one time, but I went in and my friend wasn't there. So I came right out and they stopped me. And I was like, yeah, I just saw that was a lesbian bar. So I left. Isn't that weird? So they had seen me, so they knew that they couldn't get me. So it actually became a cover for me. But yeah, those were the days when they used to try to get us to tell on other compadres and other veterans and spread the web and try to eliminate as many of us as they could. But they were not as strong as we were.
Well, we were a clever bunch. They gave us a list of all the places that were off limits. So then we were like, oh, those are the places to go.
And I also appreciate that you're a caregiver to your dad. That impresses me as well. I know how hard and difficult that task is, especially with dementia. I have a 90-year-old brother-in-law, 96 years old, 96-year-old brother-in-law that is an Army vet that was a POW, and he has dementia now. And he said the most wonderful thing to me a couple of years ago. I was there visiting, and he asked my sister Pamela, who is she, meaning what relation is she to me? And Pamela said, she's your sister-in-law. And he says, I don't understand. And so Pamela said, she's my sister. And he said, lady, I don't know who you are, but I know I love you. And I was like, Mike, that's good enough. That's good enough. I've always remembered that, you know. He couldn't quite put it together, but he knew that I was somebody in the family, and he knew that he loved me, and that was good enough.
That's
That was
right.
good enough.
That's right.
So let's talk some about transgender rights and where you started in all of that work and how that came to be.
Well, I'd say it was about 20 years ago that I became sort of socially involved in the transgender community. That was when I was in college in Colorado, in Denver, Colorado. I didn't start my own gender transition until 2005. So there was about maybe an 8-year period of time where I was involved in the community, but somewhat on the margins of the community. And so I became involved in a few different ways. I was invited to and served for 5 years on the Transgender American Veterans Association Board of Directors. I also, when I was an employee at the Department of Veterans Affairs, I was appointed to 2 national work groups, one that dealt with LGBT veteran issues, patient care services, and one that dealt with LGBT employee issues. And so I was able to do things like develop and design trainings for staff around transgender veterans care based on policy at the VA. On the employee side, I was able to bring together a team of 4 of us, and we developed a guidance for trans employees who want to transition on the job. Like, who do you contact to get a new email address, and how do you get a new set of business cards, and all the nuts and bolts about how to change your name through the HR system. So that went live or public in 2000. I believe it was 2017. So that's still a working document with the VA.
Great.
With the Transgender American Veterans Association, I'm no longer a board member with them, but as an organization, the goal and mission is to work with transgender veterans who may be experiencing difficulty navigating through the VA, either Veterans Benefits or Veterans Health Administration, to access their benefits, education benefits, or their healthcare benefits. And so a lot of what we did is we acted as a liaison between the veteran and the Department of Veterans Affairs. And this was mostly before they instituted a brand new person at the VA, or a role at the VA. So every VA healthcare system, which is the medical center and all its attached clinics, now has at least one LGBT veteran care coordinator. And so that's like the patient advocate for LGBTQ now, veterans. So that's the person that veterans can go to if they're having any difficulty identifying it, like a trans-friendly doctor, or if they're having difficulty navigating through the medical gender process, or getting their name or their sex marker in the system changed. They can go to the LGBT veteran care coordinator. Not always, but usually it's a social worker. So they could just go to the social work department or ask the social worker at the outpatient clinic who the LGBTQ veteran care coordinator is, because that's a role now that's instituted.
That's wonderful that you bring up that position so that people have a point of contact,
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. In most places, they're dedicated about 10, maybe 15, maybe 20% of their time can be dedicated to that. The rest has to be their primary job. But there are 2 or 3 LGBTQ veteran care coordinators now in the country that are full-time. That's all they do, right? They work at these larger systems where there's hundreds of LGBTQ veterans. And so there's enough work to keep them busy as a full-time position. So and we have one here in Orlando. She's a full-time, 100% dedicated coordinator. So
what was it like to go through the policy changes, to have Obama do one thing and then who do something else?
Well,
I won't even
so
dignify his name.
well, I hope you're not too disappointed because I show respect to all presidents, and so I
Okay.
will say President Trump.
Okay.
As a commander in chief, that's sorry.
Yes.
So when I started with the Navy, it was the last day of May 2016, and so just 1 month into my job, the announcement came out, or the directive came out, announcing that starting on October 1st of 2016, active duty service members could go through a medical transition, as long as they did it in a very particular way, right? They set up a system in each branch of the military as how people could get referred over to the team, like us, the transgender care team for Navy Medicine West. Navy Medicine East also had a transgender care team out of Portsmouth, Virginia. The Air Force had a transgender multidisciplinary medical team, MMDT, in San Antonio. They're still there. And then the Army, I'm not exactly sure how they worked it out. I think they had multiple because their medical is divided up very differently than Navy and Air Force. That'll be changing because Defense Health Administration is taking over all military medicine, so
Right.
that might be changing in the future. But so that announcement came out, and the acting commanding officer of Balboa Hospital, she sent out an email to the whole command announcing that this was now going to be policy starting October 1, the start of the fiscal year, right, with a new TRICARE budget. And so I did what most people wouldn't do. I hit reply directly back to the commanding officer or interim commanding officer, and I reminded her that we had just met about 2 weeks prior during my onboarding as a GS-12 social worker, and that I had come from the VA, that I had worked with transgender veterans, that I was serving on the transgender veterans, American Veterans Association, that I myself was a transgender veteran, and that if there was any way I could be of service, to please don't hesitate to call on me. Without missing a beat, 10 to 15 minutes later, I got a response from her directly, not her executive assistant, telling me, thank you for reaching back. I'm having a meeting in a week. I want you at that meeting. So I was the only civilian at this meeting of all of the department heads. Well, it was more than that. It was much higher up, the directorates, right? All in uniform. And so I was able to be at that meeting, and it was during that meeting that we discussed that I think it was the Bureau of Navy Medicine and Surgery, so BUMED, wanted a case manager assigned to start working on developing some of the parts of the transgender care team. We didn't know what it was going to be called then, but starting to get things rolling. So that was me. That's what I was. I was a social work case manager, and I was able to develop the intake process, the orientation process, and then build a database, and then it just went from there. The team was put together, and we started seeing veterans, or excuse me, service members. December 9th was the first day we were stood up and ready to go and writing treatment plans. So between July 22nd approximately and December 9th, we were just getting everything situated and ready to go. And so then, of course, there was a new president in January.
Zander, I'm going to stop you right there for a minute so that we can take a station break, and then we'll continue with what Donald Trump's policies were when we come back from the station break, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Take it away, Sue.
Well, it is an incredible honor to have Zander Keig with us here on the show this evening. And the conversation has just been so rich. And so we want to invite you, if you're watching on any other platform other than Facebook, we do want to invite you to our Facebook page and our group. So our Facebook page is TFAM Veterans, and also the Facebook group is TFAM Veterans Group. So we want you to like the page and also join the group so that you are kept up to date on everything that is going on with the Veteran Among Us LGBTQIA Veterans Plus National Veterans Support Group. And if you have an idea for a topic, or if you want to be on one of the broadcasts, we certainly welcome you. We invite you to hit us up on our page or even inside the group and let us know so that we can have your idea come to life here on our broadcast. Chaplain Mo is here. We haven't seen Chaplain Mo in a little while, but she has an organization called Transformations Possible. She is a an advanced law of attraction practitioner, and she has life coaching available. So if you're interested, you can send an email to transformationspossible@gmail.com or give her a phone call at 808-264-6252. If you've been watching us for the last season at all, we also have that chaplain um, PJ, Dr. PJ, also has a show on Thursdays called Triumphant Thursdays with Dr. PJ Anderson. It's on Thursdays at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. You can find that at the Space for Grace Facebook page of SFG Without Walls, and also on Chaplain PJ's personal page, Chaplain PJ, and also on YouTube. You can just look up Dr. PJ Anderson on YouTube, and it will bring you right to that page. Certainly, both of these programs weekly are blessings, and so we do invite you to join us on Thursdays at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. As this is a TFAM related broadcast, we want to just make sure you know all about our summit. TFAM is having our leadership summit, our virtual leadership summit, happening this Friday and Saturday, October 1st and 2nd, from noon to 7 o'clock daily. And so we are gathering, what our purpose is to redefine prophecy and the role of the prophet in this moment. And our speakers and panelists are social entrepreneurs who center wholeness, activism, and artistry while challenging systems of bad theology. What you see right here on this flyer doesn't even cover all of who we have. I think we have about 16 speakers and panelists. It is something that you need to be a part of. Registration is $40. And so if you're interested in registering, you can head over to bit.ly, bit.ly /TFAM Summit 21. That's TFAM Summit 21. Please join us. We would love to have you. Kara Solutions, focus on your passion. Let Kara handle the rest. I offer remote production and video conferencing, administration, and tech support. I do custom branding, promo graphics, overlays, all of that good stuff. And this should have been off. I'm so sorry. Show development and training. If you need training on Zoom or StreamYard or Restream or any one of those web-based platforms, I'm your girl. And so if you want more information on this or any of my other services, you can visit my website at www.kara-solutions.com. If you have an idea for a broadcast of your own and you're not sure how to get started, I can help you with that. I'm a great conversation partner. You can send me an email at sue@kara-solutions.com for a free half an hour consultation. Once again, we want to invite you to like our page and join our group on Facebook. We thank you for joining us tonight, and we are going back to having conversation with the incomparable Zander Keig.
Hello, Zander. Sorry I had to interrupt you, but it seemed like such a natural breaking place because it was a natural breaking place.
Absolutely.
So do you want to tell us what happened between Obama's version of the world and Donald Trump's decision and how it affected transgender veterans and transgendered service members?
Absolutely. Well, it didn't impact transgender veterans. The Department of Veterans Affairs, nothing happened there. Everything just stayed as it was. As a matter of fact, they added orchiectomies, which is the removal of the testicles, as an additional procedure that transgender female veterans could access by a VA surgeon or sent out into the community. So they actually gained during President Trump's administration. And also the LGBT veteran care coordinator programs, some people went full time. So that's a good thing. Now, as far as the military, there's going to be differences between what happened in the Navy, what happened in the Air Force, and what happened in the Army. And it's indirectly related to perhaps President Trump, specifically the tweets, right? So from January of 2017 until August of 2017, everything was just going status quo. People were being referred over to us. I was doing intakes and orientations. People were coming through. They were getting channeled off to go see the gynecologist or the urologist. They were meeting with mental health people. They were getting a treatment plan drafted. It was being sent back to their medical command. Everybody was signing it. Everything, all the balls were just rolling in the right direction. There was no hiccup at all. And then those 3 successive tweets came out from the president about transgender people not being able to serve in the military anymore. And what happened, unfortunately, is that too many people took that as a serious action, right? Like, tweets don't make policy. So even though the tweets happened, it didn't impact policy, because policy has to go through a much more formal process. So we just kept getting people referred over to us and coming through the process and keep on going. People were still getting treatment plans. People were still getting hormones. That went all the way to the end of 2017, all of 2018. It wasn't until early 2019 that an actual new policy came out that separated people into 3 different categories. Those individuals who were not yet in the military, if they were trans and they had started a gender transition, they probably weren't going to be welcome into the military, but they could ask for a waiver, and some waivers were issued. They could say, I'm transgender. They haven't had any transition, medical transition, but they could come in, but they had to serve in their biological sex. They couldn't serve. They couldn't get access to the medical transition. Then there were the 2 categories of people inside the military. Those who had already disclosed, right? They had come forward, they had come out, whatever language people want to use. And they said, they got referred over to the transgender care team, or they had just gotten a diagnosis of gender dysphoria, which was an initial requirement. Those people got to keep on going. That it didn't interrupt them at all, at least not in the Navy. I heard that there might have been some slowdown, some disruptions in the Army. I'm not exactly sure what the Air Force did, but we didn't have any hiccups in Navy Medicine West. People just kept still getting referred. And then there was the other people who were serving on active duty who had never come forward, right? So they were transgender identified, but they never disclosed that to their command. They never received a gender dysphoria diagnosis. They could still be out like a gay or lesbian or bisexual service member. They could be out as transgender, but they didn't get access to gender transition, medical gender transition, unless they applied for a waiver and were issued one, and that also happened. So there were waivers given. So it wasn't an all-out, people use this language of like trans ban, and there was a trans ban prior to the policy that went into effect in the last 6 months of Obama's 8 years in office. And I bring that up intentionally to say, what took him so long? I'm really bummed that President Obama didn't do that earlier, because it would have been much more difficult to undo. But it was only in place for 6 months. There was a lot that there wasn't enough in place to, it was easier to undo because it had not been policy for more than 6 months when the new president took over. So, that's one of the things that I'm not happy about Obama about, is why he waited so long. Again, for marriage and for Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and for transgender active duty service. All of those things should have been done in his first term and very early into it. But he was against gay marriage when he came into office, if you remember. So as was Clinton, Hillary Clinton. So, we have to grapple with these kinds of issues. But it wasn't until right around April or May of 2019 that new policy went into effect. And in May of 2019, I left my job with the Navy because I needed to take care of my father. And things are very different now, because now there is a new policy that is, but by the way, all the time, I left the transgender care team, but I was replaced by a nurse case manager who just kept seeing patients and doing the intakes and the orientations. So people were still getting approved, still getting treatment plans, still getting hormones, still getting on-base surgeries, the minor surgeries, and still going off-base at transgender surgery centers around the country for the more more complicated surgeries, the genital reconstruction surgeries or bottom surgeries. Those never stopped. So.
And are you on now, Chaplain PJ?
Huh?
Are you on now?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
I just
I'd
wanted
like
to
to
bring
ask
it
a
up to where we are now.
Okay. But I might forget my question, and then you can bring me up.
Okay, ask the question. Yeah.
Ask the
Okay.
question.
This is the question that I've already forgotten. So let me ask the one that I just remembered. Can retired transgender service members get the surgery, the bottom surgery?
So my understanding is that the surgeries are only for people who are on active duty. However, for people who are retired, who can use the Department of Veterans Affairs, right? I don't know why people would. You just have health insurance. You can go anywhere, but you can get the hormones through the VA, and now if you're trans female, right? So and you can get an orchiectomy, which is the removal of the testicles. And the reason for that is it lowers your intake of medication, right? Because transgender females, if they're doing a medical transition, they do an androgen blocker in addition to the estradiol or the estrogen. And so they can stop taking that androgen blocker. So then they don't have to take two medicines, just one medicine. So that's why they were approved that. Whereas trans men don't get hysterectomies covered by the VA unless it's for another reason, other than gender transition. So TRICARE for Life doesn't cover, TRICARE active duty covers things. But I can tell you that there were dependents that were able to access things like hormones and psychotherapy through military, either on base or through TRICARE out in the community. And there were a couple of people, some younger dependents, like teenagers, who were able to access, for example, top surgery or chest reconstruction, right, for the young trans male, like the dependents of the active duty service members. And it was covered by TRICARE, but it was a very difficult process. It took a lot of back and forth to get that, but they definitely cover hormones. So either the VA or through TRICARE.
Well, I'm certainly not making any excuses for President Obama. We do know that during his time, he brought on board Bishop Flunder. And we also know that during his time that the Republicans were blocking him at every turn. And I think personally, I think he did the best he could under the circumstances. And okay, that's debatable, but that's the way I see it.
Yeah, of course.
And is there a change? Is there a noticeable change, particularly for those on active duty, in terms of attitude toward the trans community from commanding officers that still are not on board, or fellow service members, particularly the Marines?
Well, so when I worked for Navy Medicine West, I worked with the sailors and the Marines and some Coasties, because Coast Guard gets their medical mostly from the Navy or Air Force if they're closer to an Air Force base. And it's one of those things where most of the Marine Corps commands, most of them were wonderful. They really were. They did a fantastic job. And you know why? And this is exactly what I heard from the commandant down. They follow rules. And if the new rule is this is how you get a patient or a sailor or a Marine referred over to the transgender care team because they're allowed to go through a gender transition with the commanding officer's approval, then they were going to follow that rule. So I appreciate their rule following. It's like when it wasn't a rule, they weren't going to do it. And then once it was a rule, they followed it to a T.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the thing about the commanding officers is that they really do have a lot of authority. And so they had the ability to delay because, for example, if you're serving on an ocean going vessel, right? If you're on a naval ship and you're serving your 2 or 3 years of sea duty, they want you to finish that out, right? They don't want to lose you. And if you left early, then that meant that somebody else had to pick up, you know, your end, and you kind of shorted your sea duty, right? So it's kind of unfair in that way. Like that's kind of the reasoning, and I can understand that. There were some issues around worldwide deployable status, right? So if you were having a surgery, well, you were going to be out for at least a week or two before the surgery, and then for the surgery, and then all the post-op. So you were going to be out of your work for anywhere from like 2 to 12 weeks or more. And so that put a lot of extra pressure on your, you know, on your fellow service members. So like I can see both sides of that issue. But we didn't have very many commanding officers that were intentionally being blockers, like, you know, like in a mean-spirited or malicious way. That rarely came across our office. So I was happy about that. For the most part, everything just moved very smoothly. There were some concerns around things that had to do with like access to certain kinds of medical care in certain parts of the world, you know, and there were issues about can we PCS, or can we move a transgender sailor or Marine to a Middle East post, right, or duty station. So there were certain cultural issues that had to be considered, and not all bases had enough medical staff that they would have an endocrinologist on staff, for example, and were other providers comfortable and willing to prescribe cross-sex hormone therapy or gender-affirming hormone therapy. You know, they use that language interchangeably. So there were some issues like that, but the commanding officer has ultimate authority over their command, and the medical staff have ultimate authority over the services they provide. So we had to sort of work within the system, but we did so fairly well as far as I can, you know, as far as I can recall. We had very few hiccups.
So
Very,
readiness
very few.
never became an issue.
Well, it did in the sense that people were offline for surgeries.
Okay.
Because they had to be sent away, right? Especially some
But
of the surgeries.
the person, it did not affect the readiness of the person.
Well, I wouldn't say that's true. There were some people who developed a lot of anxiety, or were exhibiting a lot of anxiety, and that meant that they went to mental health a lot more,
I
and
see.
that caused issues. There were, you know, it's like in every group of people, there's going to be some people who are just a bit more troubled by things, right?
Okay.
And so let me give you an example. When those 3 successive tweets came out for President Trump, referring specifically to transgender service members, some of the service members on my caseload had a very, very strong reaction to that, right? Not a lot, but a few. On the other hand, I had quite a number of people who emailed me or called me, or stopped by my office and said, you know what? If I were to get up tomorrow and my choices were get out and transition or get up, put on my uniform and go to work, I'm going to put on my uniform and go to work, because the military was their primary mission, not their gender transition. And that's what it was supposed to be, right? Even in the original policy, gender transition was not supposed to be the primary. It's supposed to be the mission. Whatever you're, as a sailor, as a fireman, as an airman, as a Marine, as a soldier, that was supposed to be primary. And so people who held that as primary did much better than people who put it as secondary or even tertiary. That was a big difference I noticed. The people who kept it primary rose up in rank, got sent off to school, re-enlisted without any problems. Which you would imagine that'd be true in any case, right? In any case, regardless of transgender.
Do we have a record of officers who made the effort to transgender?
Well, each branch has a database, but it's not accessible by anybody except the members of the transgender care team, the medical staff. So
Okay.
that was something that I had access to. A few of the members of the transgender care team for Navy Medicine West, we all had access to that database, but it wasn't something that we shared. We definitely didn't share rank. There were lots of things that we kept that out. We didn't
Okay.
even put it in the database.
Okay.
Because you never know, right? You never know when, especially when some of the court proceedings started, then they started needing us to retain emails and keep correspondence, you know, that had been sent to us. So, because then the courts might call that up, you know, as evidence. So we kept the database as unidentifiable as possible for HIPAA to protect, you know, for
Sure.
confidentiality.
So, what do you think is the primary reason for the number of suicides going up among veterans? In general, aside from aside from the transgender veterans, just in general, do you have a response as it relates to the pandemic, as it relates to faith-based organizations not accepting the LGBTQ community, still not accepting the LGBTQ community? Is it the dynamics of the family? All of the above? None of the above? What's your take on that?
Well, I should mention that I did not know that there was a significant uptick in LGBTQ veteran suicide. That's not something I was aware of.
Well, I don't know that it's specific to LGBTQ, but Chaplain Maureen informed us a couple of weeks ago that we've gone from 22 a day to 23.
Got it. Okay. Well, I can tell you when I worked at the VA, especially with the Healthcare for Homeless Veterans program, that there were men on my caseload because there are very few homeless women in our society, right? Women get pulled off the streets much more quickly. The only women you see on the streets that are chronically homeless are typically the ones with psychotic disorders who are unmedicated, right? Or maybe have a significant substance abuse issue. And so they don't want to go inside, right? So when I was working with the Healthcare for Homeless Veterans program, one of the things that I noticed in my population of the veterans I worked with is that a significant number of them were completely on their own, right? Because of either their Vietnam experience or their Gulf War experience, they had their families abandon them. Because they came back with a lot of trauma, right? They were traumatized. They had PTSD and moral injury issues they were dealing with, right? The guilt and the shame that accompanies what happens when you're in combat. And it's like, who do they go to and talk about that, right? There's sort of a code of silence. There's a sense of, you know, a warrior ethos, right? Where you're supposed to be strong for your company, right? Strong for your command, strong for your team. But another thing that I noticed was that there were a significant number of men on my caseload at any given time that I was looking more closely who had military sexual trauma experience, right? And so when we think about MST or military sexual trauma, we almost never think of men. We almost always only think of women. But of course, because there are more men in the military, there are more men who have MST experiences, right? And MST is sexual harassment and sexual assault. And so a lot of them had childhood sexual abuse and then military sexual abuse or harassment. And so I think that really breaks down people. And many of them had attempted suicide. But we know that men commit suicide. They die by suicide way more often than women do. And it's because they take more lethal actions towards it. So that could also be the difference, that if the number's going up, I would imagine it's mostly men, and that's because men use more lethal methods of taking their life. But I think it has to do a lot with a lack of feeling like they have a place where they can go and they can talk to somebody who understands. It's not so easy. My experience has been that it's not so easy for men who have been sexually assaulted to open up to people about that. And especially considering that most of the staff who work in the MST clinics are all women,
Oh
right?
my.
And they might not want to open up. They might
Mhm,
want to be that vulnerable to talk about, a man telling a woman they were raped, right? Like that might be very, very uncomfortable for them.
mhm,
So they
mhm,
instead might elect, right? And they're married. Maybe they have let's say they're heterosexual. They have a wife. They've never disclosed to their wife that they were sexually harassed or assaulted. And so they're carrying around all of this shame. Um, I mean, I'm a big fan, so to speak, of moral injury as a primary motivator for why we have so many suicides, addiction, and homelessness um, in our veteran community. I'm not sure if you're familiar with moral injury.
yes,
Oh, good, good. I
yes.
figured you would be.
You probably know the name Dr. Bart Billings out there in San Diego. He wrote the book on a book. He's one of many that wrote a book on moral injury. Did Chaplain Maureen, did you share your story of sexual assault while serving? You're
You're
muted,
muted.
sweetie. You're muted. There you go.
I said, no, I didn't, but we're right at the hour right now, so I don't think this is an appropriate time.
Well, that's even more of a reason, Dr. Zander, Reverend Dr. Zander, that we.
Those are honorifics, by the way. I'm neither of those things.
I see. But we would love to have you back to continue the conversation because we did not cover a lot. We did not cover a lot. And offline, we'll talk about when we could do that. And I can catch up with Chaplain Maureen also offline about what I missed tonight. Had serious internet connections. So I want to say, do you have closing remarks, Chaplain Maureen?
No, just once again, I appreciate all of your service and not just your military time, but all that you do for the LGBTQI community. And I just really respect you. I salute you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Chaplain.
Absolutely. Well, I certainly will say amen to that. And while we do not make this a religious program, we do intentionally share with our audience that we support the hospitality of God, that we are radically inclusive, and that we encourage people if they have not um, if someone has not said to them, "I love you," to go to the mirror and look at the man and the woman in the mirror and say, "I love you." And so we usually end with something like that because we don't want to come across as proselytizing because that is not our intent. Our intent is to inform, inspire, and and I encourage people to understand that they are created in the image of goodness and the likeness of God. And all of it is within. All of the healing that we could ever need, that we could ever want, is within. All of the realm and kingdom and kingdom of God we could ever want to participate in is within. And it is certainly separate and apart from any words of condemnation or guilt or shame that anyone clergy or parishioner. I mean, pastor or parishioner, clergy or congregation, has said to any of us is a crock of you know what, because that number one, that's not who God is. And in order for God to create us in God's image and God's likeness, then we are created good and we are created with love. Good night.